Well, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us tonight in our fourth installment of our Marriage Tune-Up series that we've been doing. First of all, I want to apologize. We're not here live tonight because Lori and I couldn't be here, but we really wanted to be a part of this week's subject. It's so very, very important. We're going to talk tonight about the seasons of life as we go through our marriages. We can call it the season of marriages because there's different seasons of life, as you well know. You've been a part of this. Many of you are married. Some of you are not and are going to be at some point. And so it's important to see this, even before you're married, that there are different seasons that go on. Regarding those of us that have been married, one of the things to be aware of as we talk together, that the season that you're in today has a beginning and it has an end. It may not be real firm. You might not be able to see the dividing lines, the boundaries, but there are beginnings and endings to seasons and entering into a new one. Each season has its own joys and its own struggles, but each season you will find as you walk with the Lord and make Him the center of your marriage, He will be there with you. Some of the seasons that we'll talk about tonight, and I don't know if we'll get to all of them, is just like in the natural, you have spring, summer, fall, and winter. In some ways, you see the same thing taking place in marriages. Springtime, that is, you find the examples of that with the optimism that takes place in the spring when young people get married and they get started off in life, and it's an exciting time. If you're married, you remember how that time was. But I also thought about the fact that with the springtime, there is also a pitfall, a trap door for young couples who believe that their lives will now be perfect. They are now complete. The spouse will fill them to overflowing. They will have no needs in their life. And then when you find out that maybe your spouse isn't all that, I don't know if you have ever found those things to be the case. But even as I share with you, and we're going to talk a little bit about these things, I have oftentimes felt, and I'll begin to talk with our panel tonight, I've oftentimes felt that young ladies come into marriage and they have these expectations. Their knight on the white horse, and he's going to be all that, and then when you marry them, you find out that there's a lot of chinks in their armor, and they're not what you thought of, and it's very easy to become disappointed and disillusioned with marriage. Young men have the same type of thing. They have expectations. They imagine how marriage is going to be, and marriage is wonderful. Those of you that are watching, marriage is wonderful.
Yeah, it is.
But there's expectations, we've talked about this earlier, that sometimes are not fulfilled. Even looking at the springtime of marriage, when you first got married, how was that for you? How did you see those things? How did it play out?
You want to answer that?
Honestly, I think that, the springtime season of marriage is full of joy. It's full of new experiences where we were finding out new things about each other. That's the joy of discovery. Just like when you're walking through a garden, oh my gosh, those flowers are gorgeous. Oh wow, look at this plant, how amazing, And there's also that thing of adjustment, right? And learning how to live with each other and how to accept each other. And definitely, for us, I had major expectations that could not be met. They were just, very idealistic, and I probably fell prey to the whole Hollywood, just those expectations of how it would look. He is an amazing man, amazing husband, and but at the beginning, my eyes were almost clouded with expectation, and I couldn't see him for what he truly was, because he was trying so hard. You were trying really hard to just please me and love me how I needed to be loved.
Yeah, I think, but part of it for a young man in particular, and I realize people get married at different stages in life and that, but maybe it's different. But when I came into marriage, there's a weight that's transferred. Like when you're dating somebody And then when you marry somebody, now you're responsible. I'm responsible for her financially, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Not that she's incapable. I mean, she had a job. That's not what I'm saying. It's not an issue of dominance in any sense, but it was a weight to me, and that was very hard for me to navigate. I didn't realize the weight till like our rehearsal that night, and I went home, and God just began to talk to me. He's like, "Look, I can. There's a grace for you," but it was weighty because I didn't want to mess it up. But then when you have somebody who has a lot of expectations, you don't realize they're unrealistic, and then you feel like you're messing up all the time. And then if you have rejection like me, then you go into rejection. So then it can really spiral. But thankfully, and I'd love to kind of throw it back because we went to we had a mentor couple for the first year. J&D Santos helped us immensely. Were always open to us, didn't treat us like you guys are broken, had words of wisdom, but also pastors that we could go to and talk to and say, look, we're struggling with this. And so maybe we can talk more about what they've invested, but I know that you guys have invested in us. And one of the things that I think you have invested that maybe is just watching couples that are still together and like, well, they're still together, so it must be possible. And they do ministry, which was important for us. And they're surviving, so that it must be possible. So that was being part of a church and being part and having people in our lives that were further down the road, I think probably made a huge difference for us in that early spring season, as you said. Yeah,
that's true. What?
I think for us, I know for you, it hit him the same way as far as being married. Now you're responsible. You have to do all this stuff. And I remember you feeling like, what have I done? I don't know. I'm not sure if I want to be married, which of course threw me into a, whatever, when your wife feels that way. But for me, I'm coming out of high school. I mean, we got married 2 weeks after I graduated.
Wow.
So for me, it was like, okay, this is going to be good. I don't have to worry about all that other stuff. We get to play house. We get to do all that stuff. My dreams wasn't a career. It was getting married, having a family, and that. And so, for me, it was all exciting. This is great. But then, the reality sets in too that, it's not all that. It's not all dreams and, and all that. So the reality hits and you hit hard times and it gets hard and you don't always do things the way you should and or respond the way you should, or so sometimes you make some of your own baggage, as you're going along because you don't know what you're doing. And I don't know if early on we did have anybody to talk to, and so we're doing this on our own and making mistakes. But here we are 46 years later, so somehow we figured out how to cohabitate together and get along most of the time.
That's true.
So
That's true.
It's a learning experience every step of the way.
But even hearing you say 46, I think gives us hope. I mean, we'll be 17, almost 18 years married, and I mean, not that we're not struggling necessarily, but we haven't been those other decades. But you look and see people that have made it and go, okay, if they can, then God can bring us through.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's certainly
and that's the whole point, is that you're seeking God to help you through this, even if things don't, things are frustrating and hard, but when you both have decided, there isn't an out to this, so our other option is to figure it out. You keep going.
Can I just speak a bit of grace, particularly to couples? There's a phrase, I think it's really a lie, that says if it's not easy, then it's not right, or it shouldn't be this hard. And there's some truth to it in a sense, but for me, I didn't feel like we hit our stride till 7 years in. Now, it wasn't horrible. It wasn't like we were fighting all the time. I mean, we loved each other. There was, but really kind of reaching a place, a level of comfort, I guess. I don't know if that's fair. I don't know how you say that. I don't want to make it sound like the wrong thing, but I remember 7 years in going, wow, I don't know if the pressure came off, or I let the pressure go a little bit, or God had grown me, which was probably all of those things. But the only reason I said it's just a bit of grace to not feel like 1, 2 months, 3 months in, you have to have marriage figured out, because that's just, I don't think, the reality that I've met for most folks. And that's an expectation that you can't live under, and shouldn't. Good things take time and they take effort, like they talked about last week with intimacy. It's something that you grow in and you learn. So
it's true. I think, just to add to that, I think it's really important, to have friends that you're getting together with. They might be in your same peer age, but also get together with those that are older than you, couples that have gone before you, like Tom mentioned, those that have walked roads a little bit further than you, to be able to receive and glean from that wisdom that they have. Because honestly, that's how we grow. We grow with the Lord, in spending time with Him. We grow with the Lord in reading the Word. And it's very much the same with people that are older than you and more mature. And so I would just encourage anyone listening, to really seek mature friendships, people that are wise in the Lord, that are mature in their faith, but also mature in their marriage. You don't want to be necessarily best buddies receiving wisdom from someone who's made really poor life choices, right? You want to walk with someone that has some wisdom, especially receiving wisdom from them in the areas of marriage and walking together. So
that's right. After the springtime season comes the summertime, and I kind of defined some of these on my own. Tonight you might look at maybe a little bit different explanations for these seasons, but it's just kind of a jumping off point. But I thought about summer as a time when careers are started. You start living solid, possibly buying a home, maturing, paying your bills on time, or maybe just paying your bills.
They call it adulting, right?
Adulting. Going to work when you don't want to go to work. Pregnancy and children. Navigating the changes that pregnancy brings and that children bring. Some of the changes, like not just diapers, but the fact that you don't sleep anymore,
right?
And there's no time for one another. And they even talked about sex and intimacy last night. Husband comes home from a day of work, has dinner. Honey, sweetheart, she's going, you're out of your mind. I'm beat. I can't do this, and that's real. That's what happens. Real. And there's also the possibility in the summertime, with all the business of life going on, that marriage can become a business. You can begin drifting away,
right?
Doing all these things and not putting into yourselves. It was during this time, and I was just thinking about this now. Lori said to me, "When did you quit being fun?"
Wow.
And
we've had that conversation. That's why I said, wow.
And it was in this time of increased, you talk about responsibility when you got married. I didn't realize that for a little while. I think it was when we had kids, had a mortgage, had to make sure you're at work, and it becomes so serious. You become so serious that really you're no fun anymore.
Well, for you, anytime you have responsibility for something, you take it seriously. I mean, to let something, if something wrong goes on, you take responsibility for it. So you work so hard to make sure everything is right, whether it be teaching the kids, raising them up, teaching them about Jesus. I mean, all those things are serious things for him, and then work, and then, and in the middle of that time was also, you were working a job. And then I don't know if that was, I think that was in this time that you also came. I mean, you were doing things for the church. I don't know if you had been on staff. At some point in there, you did come on. And so, when he'd get off work at night, then he would come to church and he'd do worship team and he'd do this and that and the other thing. And, so you were very busy. And so every bit of his time was, so when he did have a moment, and he knows, I'm a father, I've got a responsibility, I've got to do something with these kids, and this is the moment I have. Whether the kids were wanting to do anything at that point or not, it was like, this is the time I have, and you will have fun. And it was
and it wasn't fun.
And it wasn't fun for anybody. But, so that, I think that season was probably the hardest for us to navigate through with all of those things. And then, of course, homeschooling. Sorry, I'm not. Homeschooling and so that put pressure on me
Right.
as well
Mhm.
as just so they were home, when most kids are
Yeah.
going to school, they're still staying home, and so
Yeah. We have a whole
there
schoolroom dedicated in our house,
yeah,
so
we did,
we know. Yeah,
and
we're
so
tracking.
there was difficulty in that, and we had 3 kids, and so they all, and so it was a stressful time in our lives that we didn't necessarily do real good at.
Yeah.
How about you guys? You've got 3
Yeah.
kids, and you're in this time right
And it's
now.
probably about the same age differences as we had.
Yeah, very much the same. We're very similar. I take things seriously, and she's laughing because it's true. And she told me one time, she's like, I came and I think I said, "How are you?" or something, and she's like, "I feel like you're just checking the box so you can say that you checked on your wife." And the reality was, I was just checking the box. It was not that I didn't care,
Oh, my
but when you
goodness.
start to compartmentalize your
Yeah,
life like
yeah.
that, because you take it serious and you want to do the father thing right, and you want to. What God, it literally just this week was showing me about Paul. Paul said, "Look, I am what I am by the grace of God." He said, "I've worked harder than any of these other apostles, but it's only by God's grace working in me."
Mhm.
And I read that this week, and God began to speak to me about there's a difference between being in your house and being present.
Mhm. Mhm.
And she would call me on that. She's like, "It's like you're not here. You're here, but you're not here.
Mhm.
You're doing this." And then I would get defensive, like, "Well, I'm doing the stuff. I'm taking care. I'm being nice to people." And as a comedian once said, you don't get credit for things you're supposed to do. You're supposed to be nice to people. You're supposed to pay the bills. You're supposed to do those things. But the reality is, I very much felt that tension, and it's only been in, I think, the last couple years where that tension is starting to ease. It's not completely. I've not arrived, but I mean, you can lay me out to the world. Maybe I haven't, but I feel like it's better. I'm learning to be present, not just checking off the box that I did it. But it is tough when you have kids, and I don't know if we can get to all of this tonight. I know but there's little things that pop up that you don't realize. So after Bella, Ileana we didn't know it, but they put her on the wrong birth control, and it just threw her out out of whack. Just I don't know, how do you say that, physiologically. And so we went to Dave and Viv, like, by the word of the Lord, is like, "What kind of birth control are you on?"
Wow.
I mean, right? And then she went and checked, and it began to mellow things out.
Mhm.
But and the reason I say that is it's those little things in that season of life when things are already more. It's almost like it can feel like a tipping point, like a breaking point. And I want to encourage couples, young, whatever, if you get to the breaking point, not the breaking of the marriage, but sometimes that conflict is necessary because you're so busy. You don't ever take the time to address the issues.
That's right.
And if it doesn't come to a head, right? And so sometimes we feel like we shouldn't have an argument. We've found sometimes those arguments are really what bring us to the place of freedom if we'll walk through it and get help. And that's just a minor. I don't know if you wanted to expand on that. I mean, you homeschool now, and you function in the midst of all. Just real quick before you answer. Guys, if you can, if your wife is a mother, if she homeschools or doesn't, make the investment in something that she likes to do outside the house where she can go do it and not have to be a mom. Find the money. It's a long-term investment. Sort it out. Make the investment. We did that from the beginning, and it just because I just had a conviction. I don't care if you take a college class. I don't care if you do something, but someplace you can get outside the house and don't be afraid to gently kick her out of the house. So you need to go get a coffee, go find a friend, do something, because like Lori said, they're in the house all the time.
Right.
I've literally been sitting in my living room, Pastor Elver, and my kids will walk right past me. "Hey, Mom, can I have a snack?" And she's looking at me. I'm like, I'm just, I'm like, "Our Mom, can I have this?" And she's like, "Your dad is sitting right there." And I'm like, "Why didn't you ask me?" They're like, "Mom, can I?" So anyway, I don't. Why are you looking at me?
I think the one thing I was gonna say is yes, like this season is very much a frenzied season, right? Before COVID happened, obviously, we all had schedules that were pretty jam packed, right? We had church services, practices, rehearsals, we had sports, different various extracurricular activities, right? Not to mention going out as family or as couples. And I think now more than ever, many of those who are at home are all kind of on the same playing field now in terms of having little kids, right? Because they're doing school at home, regardless if they're homeschooled prior to COVID, right? Everybody's kind of going through that adjustment phase. And so I think now more than ever, there's got to be grace for yourselves. There's got to be grace and consideration for your partner who's now having to take on more weight in terms of education, making sure all the meals are provided, right? Because that means lunchtime provided as well for the kids there, instead of like first thing in the morning, you get all the lunches packed and you get it taken, away with the kids. But I think that there has to be grace for yourself in this season, because as a mom, I remember many times feeling very guilty when Tom would say, go do something. And I'm like, how could I leave my kids? How can I, even when we were, when our kids were a lot younger, we would go out on a date and we would drop the kids off with the sitter, or the sitter would come. And it was like, as a mom, all I could think about was our baby at home, or, oh gosh, are they going to cry? Are they going to pitch a fit or something? Right. And so it was a difficult season in that mentally, as a mom, I had to just release the kids to the Lord, release what our schedule looked like. And it was not easy for sure. I mean, he and I have been doing ministry things since like our 3rd month of marriage. But even prior to that, we were ministering, just as leaders in the youth. And so, there's probably not really been a season in our marriage where we haven't had something on the schedule and a purpose to accomplish in that way. But I would also say just, he was mentioning find something for your wife to do, right? But I think too, it's so important to have time for each other carved out to where you go do something fun. Like you were saying, have fun. It's supposed to be enjoyable, and I think when we get so bogged down, it's difficult to find the joy in those things because there's so many things that are taking our energy, and then before you know it, there's like a little sliver of the pie left. Oh, here, babe, have this little tiny sliver. And that's, I think, if anything, from all of our years of marriage, that's probably been his biggest complaint, is not having something left for him. And so that's tough. That's tough to hear as a spouse, because it's like, are you serious? I've done everything for everybody else.
We had that conversation. They're
the ones that miss out on the most, I think.
We had that conversation one time. There was situations going on, and I was so busy trying to take care of all of these different things. And Lori said to me, we might have gone to bed one night. She said to me, do you have anything left for me? Basically anything left in the tank? And I said, I'm sorry, hon, I don't. And hearing myself say those things and coming to the realization of that. Now, mind you, I don't know if I changed anything, but that's pretty horrible in the midst of marriage, not to have something left over for the other person. I mean, I picked up on that last week about so much of the subject matter of romance, sex, and intimacy is about what you give. And if you've given it all at the office or with the children or whatever it is, I don't know how to really fix those things except to start thinking about it, prioritizing it, trying to make it right.
I think one thing that we did do that was good when the kids were little is we made sure that they had a certain bedtime.
Oh, yes.
And, it was, I don't even know what it was. It was probably like 7:30 at night or something like that. For this day and age, it's like, what? My kids would say that so early. But it does, you get them to bed. And he was really good about, after dinner, then he would give the kids their baths and give me that time to get myself together, or whatever,
Find where your sanity went.
Rest a little bit, try to gather some pieces back. And you would do the bath times and story time with the kids. He'd read to them and put them to bed. And then, we had the evening, and it was so necessary. And I would suggest that for anybody to, make that time because
Yes.
you need to. Tomorrow's coming.
No.
You
That's
need
right.
a little bit of a space in there, and we never we never felt that way about going out on a date and only thinking about our kids. Sorry, we were so glad to get out. I think that it was
That's
like
awesome.
okay. So
Free
I
at
don't-
last, free at
good
last.
Parents, bad parents, I don't know, but
Let's-
we looked to that time and I did not think about my children at all, except hoping that the babysitter was okay.
Let us echo we've always had a bedtime for our kids.
Mhm.
It's not draconian, but if you let your kids run your life, they'll run your life.
That's right.
If you let your kids I'll go to bed when I go to bed, then you're going to be a worn out, miserable spouse. And there's that old adage, but it's true. And it's not that a wife is manipulating, but if mama's not happy, nobody's happy, and sometimes they're just worn out. And so our kids have always had a bedtime. If you have trouble with a child who doesn't they just can't go to sleep. Our rule has always been, if you can't sleep, you can read a book until you fall asleep, but you're not getting out of the bed. So and that may sound draconian. How could you treat your kids that way? My wife's sanity is more important to me than my children's comfort. And since we've done it forever, they know what it is. And we're not it's not we hit them over the head like this is the law. And there's times that we stay up and watch movies. There's times, where they'll have special times or whatever. But we get that. But for the general rule of thumb, this is the bedtime, and you understand it, you know when it is, and then that gives her time, like Lori said, to find the pieces before you got to start again.
And those are good points because some folks in their own lives, they don't have structure. So their children grow up and they don't have structure. And what happens is that everybody's gone out of their minds. Everybody's gone crazy. And I felt this, not only was it good for us that the children went to bed at a consistent time and an early time, it was good for them.
Yep.
They got rest. They were healthy. They don't wake up generally cranky in the morning. If you've got a child that has not gotten enough sleep, they're cranky. Well, if they're cranky, you're miserable.
Right, it's true.
So it's good for the whole family. And it brings up one other point I hadn't thought about before, is the investment in one another. The investment in couples and husband and wife. If sometimes parents have this a misguided view that everything is about the children. We do this with the children, that with the children. We don't have time for ourselves because we're doing all this for the children. But the problem is that you end up growing apart. And if this isn't good, then things aren't good for the children. The investment has got to be here. It doesn't mean that you don't do anything with the kids, but they do not, as you said earlier, run your life. You have to lead them in life, and you can't lead if you're not together.
I got a question since you brought that up. Obviously, you guys have been married longer than we are. You have not just kids out of the house, but you have grandkids, and how I don't know what season this would fall into. I don't know if it's fall or winter or whatever, but how did you navigate the quietness? I know it's been a little different for you. You guys have had people come in and go out, but I mean, not just the quietness, but I mean, I don't know what it's like to just have her in the house. And so we've heard people, obviously, that are further down, they retire, right? And then the wife is like, you got to find something to do because I have my schedule. I have my thing. I have my, not bad, right? It's just you have your routine. And then when somebody gets in your routine, if you're like me, it's like, how does this work? But then, you don't have that distraction of kids. And I think it can become a distraction if I don't want to deal something with in my marriage.
Sure.
It can become kind of the default. We'll just talk about the kids or, whatever, rather than deal with that. I'm not saying that you guys went through that, but it just popped in my head as an interesting.
Well, you're absolutely right in what you're talking about. I would see this when we'd go out. Remember a long time ago when you used to be able to go out to dinner, go to a restaurant, and we were going. This would be younger, and we'd see an older couple. By older couple, they're probably our age or younger now, but you'd see an older couple. They'd be at dinner. This is before cell phones. They'd be at dinner, and they both have their newspaper, and there is no communication going. And I'd be going, oh my, I don't want that to be us.
Right.
I don't want that. And it's something you have to work at young, but you have to work at when you're older. So that's one point. If you haven't worked on it young, it makes it tougher.
So you're saying you don't run out of things to say to one another, even though you've been together a long time?
Well,
we do, and sometimes there's just it's just okay. The silence is okay, but yeah, we do have to work sometimes to finding, because things are different. You don't have the same things going on in your life to talk about.
Right.
So, there is some reinventing even conversation.
Wow.
How are we going to do? What do we talk about? We don't want to talk about politics. We don't want to talk about,
Right.
but yeah, we sometimes we get quiet, and sometimes and that's okay. But if we never talk, that's a problem. And so sometimes because we've had the kids, and then they go, and then some would come back, and then they go, and we have one back now,
who we love very much, if you happen to see her.
But jumping ahead to that winter season of the empty nest, we had people, how are you doing with that? How are you doing with that? And we're just kind of going, it's like going to dinner and not talking about the kids. It wasn't a problem. And it's like, we're good. We're good, except that, he doesn't sit long. He's usually busy. He's got his little tasks and his
I wouldn't
things
know
going
anything
on.
about that.
And so I have a whole different, personality than him, as far as, he's always got to have something doing, and me, I will go so far and then I stop. And so then I have to deal with the guilt of, because I've stopped and he's still going. And it's like, go.
You don't have that guilt, do
But-
you? Do you have that guilt? I didn't think so.
She goes, I'm fine. But you know what?
Because we're really similar that way. She knows what her limit is in a good way, and you can speak to need to get rest, so I'm not, because I had things, other things I got to do, and one of the hardest things it is for me is to rest. But anyway.
That's being a responsible male. I mean, you're growing and you're learning your responsibilities, and so you continue to do the things that there's still things that need to be done, and so you do that. It's sometimes finding that time to say, okay, now I need to stop, and that would be the hardest time for him, is to say, okay, I need to stop now, and we'd go on vacation. It'd take maybe to the third day before he'd finally relax. So
it's definitely like that for us, especially going out of town. I think, when we get the chance to do that, we definitely try to plan out a little bit longer time, just for that very reason. He's not easy to just completely unplug and, just engage with being free and not having to think about his responsibilities. And so, but I think, as the years have gone on, I think we've gotten a little bit more, we've gotten better at that. Because we both have responsibilities, and we both kind of are forward thinkers, planning ahead, thinking about what's going to happen in the next couple weeks. Okay, well, how do we need to start thinking about those? What do we need to talk through? It's kind of like going through that checklist. But when you go on vacation, you kind of have to toss that out the window, and that's really hard to do.
Yeah.
But
and I don't. Just to that point, you can't go beyond the season that you're in, and I have a tendency to do that because there's no grace in that for that next season. Whatever I think it's going to be like, what I'm learning is it's typically not the way I think it's going to be like anyway. So I spent all this time preparing for something that's never going to happen, or like that way. And then the other way is, but as Pastor Elver mentioned earlier, the season that you're in is not going to last forever. So you got to have that. You got to always be led by the Spirit in that.
Right.
That if he wants you to plan, you plan. But if he's saying don't go there, you just don't go there. And you got to. I'm learning how to rest in that, and that's really difficult because when you're married, you have to learn to have a pace together. right? Especially decision making.
Mhm.
You know, in all these seasons, there's decisions that have to be made, whether
Right.
you know they're financial or they're kid related or whatever. And sometimes I have to go at the pace of my wife, where I'm already down the road. This is what we need to do. This is how we need to do it. Let's just get it done. But she's hearing something from, and this is frustrating. I'll just be honest with you. She's hearing something from the Lord, but she can't vocalize it and give me the ABC, like where I already given her the spreadsheet. Like, this is the reason why, this is what we should do. And it goes back and forth. Sometimes I'm that way with her. Like, I can't tell you why, but I just don't think we should right now.
Mhm.
And you really have to grow in that trust for one another.
Mhm.
We had to do that early on. I would ask Ileana her opinion, and she wouldn't give me her opinion. And I finally had to go to her and like, look, I'll take the ultimate responsibility if we go south on this. But I need to hear what God's saying to you, because I trust what God's saying to you, and I don't want to just make a decision without that input. And guys, as much as we're supposed to be head of the house, if you're not listening to your wife, you're
It's not good.
it's not good. Pastor, what is it? Apostle Dave says the Holy Spirit sounds a whole lot like your wife.
Yes.
And I found that to be true. And I found that not just with my wife, but Lori said things to me, Linda, Vivian, there's been other people, and you hear the wisdom of the Holy Spirit if you learn. And I think part of learning how to hear that even from other people is learning how to hear it from your wife. And it's kept me out of some trouble, just hearing just little bits of wisdom or the Holy Spirit in what somebody else is saying. So in any season. So
You guys haven't been to the fall or winter seasons yet. I'm not sure which season. Honestly, we might be in the early winter season. Those of you that are in the winter season, don't lose hope. There's still great things that God wants to do, but sometimes in the winter season, what comes to the surface is things that we've not dealt with in the earlier years, things that went on, let's say, in the summer season with the children and all, and there can be resentments towards one another that haven't been dealt with, and the truth of the matter is there's no children to divert your attentions, etc. You talked about what's it like in a quiet house. If you have not dealt with these things, now they can come to the surface, and now there can be that anger towards one another that, well, to say that it's not healthy doesn't quite say it all. And that's why I think it's crucial to deal with these things, the things that you're struggling with, to communicate with one another. So you can talk these things through. Good grief, you want your home to be a happy place, a place where love is growing. I honestly believe, and to give you guys hope that are younger, your fall, your winter seasons can be the very, very best years of your life. Beginning to understand one another, and because it takes some time, beginning to be at peace with one another. Your love grows. I remember asking my father when I was probably we're still dating, Lori and I was just like a maniac. I was in love with her and stuff. And he said to me something about the difference between my age and his age. When I was young, it was like this out of control forest fire going on in me. And when you get older, there's a settledness. Man, that heat is there. That fire is there. Because my fire towards Lori has not changed a bit since, 18 or 17 and 15 when we first started going together. But as it matures, I don't know how to say it. It's still there. It's not out of control. It's a love that begins to, you want to be concerned about your spouse all throughout your life, but it becomes more concerned about her than yourself. So the winter season has the potential of being the best time of your life. It seems hard to believe because you look in the mirror and you go, well, the hair's gone gray. The jowls are sagging. What is this thing under my arm, for goodness sakes? And you struggle to see your belt. There's these negative things. But the things of the heart, the things of the Spirit, as we walk with Jesus and keep him in the center, those things
Wow.
increase.
That's good.
And who would have thought that, I always say this, but who would have thought that we would love someone as old as we are now when we were teenagers? We'd think, oh my God, how gross. These people are dinosaurs. But it grows, and it's wonderful.
I guess the analogy that I heard in the winter season is that as you invest now, and when we were talking earlier, all of us, you were talking about sowing into all of the seasons. And what Ileana was saying, that was what I was hearing, was if you want the warmth of the fire in the winter, you got to do the work now. You got to learn how to communicate, learn to be honest, and honest communication, and really telling somebody something that makes you vulnerable. I'm not saying blasting them, but and being willing to walk through. One of the greatest things Ileana's ever said to me was in the midst of a conflict, and I'm like, you need to change, or whatever. And she looked at me and she said, I know, and I've asked God to change me, but it's not going to be today. And it wasn't out of a place of defiance. It wasn't out of a place of I'm not going to change, but it released so much grace into my life to realize she's relying on God, and she's committed to whatever God's doing. And it just changed my attitude, and sometimes I can demand or whatever, but I'm realizing what you're saying is, if I want there to be a fire in the house in a good way in the winter, I got to trust God and trust God in those moments now, early in the spring and the summer that we're in. We haven't reached the fall or the winter yet. So thank you for that. It really helps me, gives me something. And the other thing that Lori said that I think was a big takeaway for me is remember to have fun. Because you can see the look on my wife's face. Like, please remember to have fun.
Listen to yourself, preachers.
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much.
It is true, because you can't go through life in hard and working hard and without having something. I mean, what are you doing it for otherwise?
Right.
And if you kill yourself working so hard and you have nothing, at the end of it, it's not worth it. But and one other thing that I was thinking about too is sometimes we're in one of those hard seasons, and you're thinking, I just want to get out of this season, and just a caution even in that, because those are the times when God, if you will surrender and listen to him, can teach you.
That's right.
The most stuff,
That's right.
The hard things. I found the hard things, the things that come out of that, sometimes you can't get any other way than through that hard time.
Right.
I mean, we've had hard times with, the kids and their health. We still have that. But there's those struggles and those hard places that if you will go to the Lord, he will answer you. He will help you through them.
Amen.
You're not doing it
Amen.
alone, and you may not see those things right away, but down the road you see what came out of that.
Wow.
And it's so well worth it that if we'd have tried to get out of that, or out of that season,
that's so good,
sooner, we'd have missed it.
Yeah, so good.
And those are things you just don't want to miss. Those are the diamonds in the journey.
That's right. If I can just say to all of you that are watching and being a part tonight, or might be watching later on YouTube, I think you just heard the word of the Lord.
Yeah.
And that is, and I can hardly say this without tears, because my heart is just breaks for couples that say, it's too hard, I'm done. Let me say, emphasizing what Lori just said, which I believe is what the Lord said. Times get tough, but don't quit. Don't give up. Don't throw in the towel. Whatever time of life it is, spring, summer, fall, or winter, it's too early to quit. Because if you will walk through these things, allowing the Lord to be the center. If you need help, call a pastor. You don't have one? Call Rancho Christian Center. Call a trusted older couple to walk through with you. But do everything possible to make this thing work. Your children are depending upon it. And your very lives, the joy of your life depends on it. Because if there's one thing that I have learned, and we talked about this when we were together, is that over the years you develop a history. You go through these seasons. You've walked together through these seasons. You've walked through it together. You remember the things that went well, the things that didn't go well. You remember when we did this? Oh, yes. We have a history.
Right.
And I know the two of you at, what did you say, 17 years?
17, yeah.
17 years. You have a history behind you, but you have a whole lot more to create as you go. And when you are our age, and there's some that are watching that are even older, you could say the same thing. When you're our age and you look back and you see the faithfulness of God every step of the way, through every hard time, He has been faithful.
That's good. So good.
And if there's anything, and I think we're probably ready to close, if there's anything that I know for sure that I want to get across to all of you that are watching tonight, is that God is faithful. He will bless your marriage. He will help you through the hard times. Psalm 23 says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I don't have to be afraid. He's with me. He will be with you.
Amen.
Through every dark valley. But whatever you do, don't let go of his hand.
Amen.
You will win in this thing called marriage. God bless you.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us tonight and for these last 4 weeks. Keep Jesus at the center.
Amen.
And
have fun.
Lord said, and have fun. God bless you. Have a wonderful evening.